Greetings. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks, Sr., your host, and this is Community Focus. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very fortunate to have with us Ms. Denise Rothenmer from Ingleside, Illinois. She's the founder and executive director of Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence. And she's also active in Equal Rights Amendment, too. It's so important. It's been discussed in Springfield at the present time. Well, good morning, Denise.
Good morning, Dr. Brooks. How are you?
All right. We're very happy to that you've taken time from your busy schedule this cold morning to be on Community Focus to tell us all there is to know about, your Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence. But I think we're going to lean on heavily on the proposal that's to compensate crime victims for legal representation. So you're quite busy. I don't know how we're going to get all of this in 28 minutes, but if we don't, we'll have a part two at a later date. And I'm so happy that I had a chance to meet you through a friend of mine who's also a community activist, Ralph Peterson Jr.
Yeah.
From that introduction, we've had a tape television show that has aired. It's online now. If anyone wants to look at that, they can go to drbrooks.tv. Just a small drbrooks.tv, and they could watch our discussion, our dialogue on crime victims for legal representation. Okay, well, let's start off now. For the listeners that don't know, tell our audience a little bit about your personal and professional background for a few minutes. You're talking with Lake County, which is approximately 750,000 people, 750 to 800,000 people. But Denise, I don't know how many up at 5 o'clock this Sunday morning listen to the program, but I understand we do have a pretty good audience.
I'm sure there's many people who are awake at this hour.
Okay, tell us about Denise.
To give you a brief synopsis, my background starts in 2003 after going through the criminal justice system. My daughter was raped at the age of 11. We stopped prosecution. And at the end of the case, I came to realize in the most unfortunate way that the system is not designed to represent the interest of crime victims. There is a difference, and it takes, years to really understand that and become an expert on victims' rights.
Mm-hmm.
Since that time, I had worked actively to change the laws. I authored and worked to pass 2 laws in the state of Illinois, Jasmine's Law, which makes alcohol an aggravating factor in the criminal code. Thereby, if anyone who commits a sexual act of violence against a minor under 18 who's under the influence of alcohol, the judge has discretion to double the sentencing, the prison term. At the time when Jasmine was raped, alcohol was not considered an aggravating factor, even though alcohol was used on her in the same way that drugs incapacitate a victim. So it didn't make sense that alcohol was excluded as an intoxicant, believe it or not. We worked to pass that, and then the second law we passed is the Victim Rights Sign-Off Sheet. Initially, that one started out as the Survivor Rights Act. I really wanted to put some teeth into the law. Mm-hmm. Victims' rights laws are unenforceable, and when rights are not asserted, they're meaningless, and it's not fair or just that anyone should go through the court vulnerable, and that's why I think they refer to us as victims. So the victim sign-off sheet was the watered-down version of what I initially proposed, because you have to face, the opposition and special interest groups, lobbyists who have their own agendas, which are not matched by those of us, in the private citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not a 501c3. I don't receive funding. I do my work out of pocket, and I only advocate for the people. That's why I do the work I do. So the victim rights sign-off sheet kind of serves as a Miranda right, where if you report a crime within 48 hours, law enforcement is they're required to provide you with information and an explanation of your rights so that you don't go through the criminal justice process unaware that you can have certain interests protected as well as apply for compensation. So now my third law here that I'm proposing is an amendment to the Victim Compensation Fund. And what your listeners should be aware of is if you are, let's say, a survivor where your son was murdered and you have funeral expenses, the Victim Compensation Fund would reimburse you up to $7,500 based on your out-of-pocket expense. That's the purpose of the compensation fund. It reimburses certain expenses that are out-of-pocket related to the criminal offense, so that the victim can rebuild and recover from the criminal offense. What I'd like to do is amend the fund because you do get a cap up to $25,000. So if you need medical, mental health, therapy, things of that nature, this fund will reimburse your costs. I believe and feel that legal representation is a valuable resource to an individual who has rights and interests they want to protect while pursuing justice. So let's take the same mother whose son's been murdered. She wants to make a victim impact statement. She wants to be notified if there's going to be a plea deal, if there's a reduced charge, or whatever the disposition of the case. But she's being excluded. She's not being informed. She's not being treated with respect for her dignity. Well, she can, based on a 2014 amendment to our Illinois Constitution, the Victim Bill of Rights, which just got passed, gives her standing. So that means that she would be able to file a pleading to assert the right. Now, this mom might not know what type of pleading to file. She might not want to go up against, let's say, a prosecutor who's actually depriving her of this right. It would be easiest for her to assert the right by retaining legal counsel. Because remember, she's mourning. And to burden her with further litigation and court, dates and all of that, to me is unjust. Well, I don't see why we can't provide her with the legal representation that's reimbursed by the compensation fund. Why does she have to be out of pocket to assert that right, to protect her interests, to maintain her dignity throughout a criminal justice process that would not even exist without her participation? And that's where we currently stand with the law, is we as crime victims can retain legal representation as though we're named parties at our expense. But because of the 2014 amendment to the Constitution, our Illinois Constitution, the Victim Bill of Rights, it bars the court from appointing an attorney for the victim. So here we have in language specific bar for the court to appoint an attorney. So this mom, if she doesn't have financial means, the judge cannot hear her situation and appoint an attorney to her because the Constitution bars the judge from doing that. Furthermore, there was language added in the Constitution that denies her a cause of action to recover attorney fees. So in the event she is able to come out of pocket for legal representation, assert the right to which she is entitled under the Constitution of Illinois, she has no way to recover those expenses because the Constitution bars her from recovery. So all of this is unfair and unjust, in my opinion, and I'm working to remedy that by amending the compensation fund.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, we're talking with Denise Rothenmer. She's a community activist, and she's operating in the behalf of the public interest. And Denise, you mentioned that it's important to you that you receive support from the public to highlight the people's interest in passing legislation that is in the interest of everyone. And also that you mentioned that laws are often enacted without our input and end up suffering the unintended consequences of poor public policy that was pushed through by lobbyists and special interest groups.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
And that's serious matter here, the reason that you're involved, right?
Correct. When I went through the criminal justice system in 2003, as I had mentioned, because it was such a traumatic experience. Now, the rape of my daughter is one trauma. That's one form of victimization.
Okay.
There's another type of victimization that you experience. It's victimization by the system. When the prosecutor in the case did not disclose the facts of the case, and I was standing next to her, I was in shock that she was not giving the judge full disclosure. And prior to hearing her deliver the factual basis, is what it's called, I was informed by the defense attorney that the state had entered into a plea deal that morning, of course. And I went to find the prosecutor and ask her why she agreed to a plea deal for the minimum 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
She told me, "You're not a lawyer. I don't have to explain the law to you."
Wow.
Now, this is all on the day of the court date, which I had no idea was going to be a day of sentencing. So when I went into the courtroom, I was just beside myself because this is the prosecutor. It was a shock to my conscience that here I have the person who's supposed to be what I had thought representing my daughter was the one throwing us under the bus, going against everything we had expressed we did not want. And I felt vulnerable. I felt helpless. I saw the bailiff upon entering the courtroom, and I asked him to tell the judge that I disagreed. I didn't know what else to do. So it was at the time when the judge called the case that the prosecutor made her opening statement, the factual basis, further defaming my then 11-year-old child. And I do use the word defamation because of the terminology the prosecutor used. You would expect only to hear from a defense attorney. When the judge had asked me if I disagreed or why I didn't accept it, I gave her the facts of the case. The judge had responded by saying, based on those facts that I gave, she said she rejected the plea deal. It was an inappropriate plea deal, given the facts of the case. So it was after that that the individual was convicted and sentenced, and it was over. I never got to speak again. I never got to talk about the second victim. There was another child who was also a victim in the case. And the bailiff had to come up to me and say, "Well, Ms. Rothenmer, you need to leave. It's over." And I'll never forget those words. It's over. And I'm thinking, how can it be over? My daughter isn't even here. I was told not to bring her. She wanted to tell the judge what happened to her. You know, there's another victim. You know, it was a real shock. And that was a shock I have not been able to get over. My daughter has done very, very well. We have been able to understand and cope with the rape. We understand, you know, what would make an individual do that and how it has nothing to do with her, or he has no power over her because, you know, we're not going to harbor any anger. We did what we could. We got the justice that, you know, we could get. But when it comes to the system, there's no closure. There's no sense. And that's the second type of victimization that I want to prevent other people from going through. And that's why this work is for the people. When I read the law, I had actually went to an attorney to sue the prosecutor for defaming my child. And the private attorney I met with faxed me a copy of the victim rights statute, the state law. And it was in there that I began to read all these rights that victims had. And then I read the very end of the statute, and it denied a cause of action. You could do nothing if your rights are violated. And I thought, well, what good is this? Well, that was in place since 1992. And really what it does, from what I've seen, is there's an industry, Dr. Brooks. It's called the sexual violence and domestic violence industry. They take in millions upon millions upon millions of dollars a year in funding to provide advocacy. Advocacy is not legal representation. Advocates are not lawyers.
Right.
We don't need advocates, Dr. Brooks. What we need is to be protected. We need our interests to be protected. The state has its interests. They want to get a conviction. Not all victims are about that. We want justice. There's a difference between convictions and justice. And so, we need our own legal representation, not advocates. But the advocates have put in place all this public policy that has really come to fail the enforcement of victims' rights and to even protect victims throughout not only the criminal justice system, but even in society. So I'm fighting those battles, and that's why I'm grassroots. I go door to door to the people. I get all my facts. I have all the documentation. I know what I say 100% before I even put it out there. Credibility is all I have, and that's how I've been able to at least get, the last two laws enacted. But it does take the support from the people, because if it's going to be for us, it needs to be done by us.
Now, Denise, you're founder and executive director of Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence. Is this when you got involved in this mission?
Well, actually, Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence, I founded in 2008.
Okay.
In 2003, after I learned there was nothing I could do to hold the prosecutor liable for defaming my child, and then learning she violated our rights, deprived us of our rights, I filed the ARDC complaint, Attorney Registration Disciplinary Commission. There was nothing that could be done. She was completely protected because the laws just were not there for us. It took about 5 years trying to navigate the legislature, because I had my first bill filed in 2003. It's stuck in Rules Committee by the state rep, the former state rep then. Then 2 years later, he filed it again after I called him out on, why this bill isn't going anywhere. Because, see, Dr. Brooks, let me explain something. When you are unaware of how things work, of what the process and procedures are, you can truly be taken advantage of. And to be ignorant is not to say you're stupid, but I was definitely ignorant of so many things starting out. But I was never stupid. So I learned. I educated myself. It wasn't until I realized by 2008 I was stepping into the territory of victim advocates, the sexual violence advocate and domestic violence advocate. So to compete, or to at least be on the same standing, I had to create an organization. So the only reason I created Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence was so I could at least compare to them, because they had such influence. And without that organization, I just wasn't able to get anywhere. And so, that's what it took. But like I said, I never did it to create funding for myself, to create a position, to become a 501c. I did it only to not compete, but to compare to those organizations and try to gain the support from those in the community, which was successful, because when you even call on elected officials, like the governor's office, attorney general's office, your senators, and all those individuals, they ask you, well, what organization are you with?
Okay. Right.
You know?
Yeah. What? We only have a few minutes left here, but I want to leave the audience with this now. As you emphasize all the way through the program that crime victims are not legal experts, and many of them have never addressed the judge, right? And
you mean the advocates or the crime victims?
Crime victims.
Correct.
They're not legal experts, you know. Now, who are the crime victims? Well, they may be children, a person with disabilities. You mentioned they're grieving family members and traumatized victims. And none of these are in a position to reasonably inform the court of violations of their rights. This is why this is so important, right?
Right, because, before crime happens, we're a person. We have a life.
Okay.
We're a mom, we're a dad, we're a husband, a wife, a sister, brother, college student, an employee, etc. So we're living our life.
Okay.
And when this happens, we don't know what state statutes there are, the criminal code, court procedures. We don't know all of that the first time we enter into the court.
Wow. Well, I hope that this program is informational and it will entice the public, that may. How do you get in contact with you? Do you have email, a website, a phone number that you may want to give?
Yes, I've always made my contact information public because, like I said, my support does depend and rely on the public participation. And that my cell phone is 847-406-8566.
Uh-huh.
The website is momsv.org, the acronym for Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence. And then my email is denise@momsv.org.
Tell us about this special daughter of yours, her educational pursuits.
Well, like I said, Jasmine is absolutely amazing. She just graduated from law school at the University of Cambridge in England. She starts her law contract in London this year in July. She's an attorney now, not here in America. She can't practice American law, but I'm very proud of her. She's an excellent student. She's a wonderful individual, very giving, very thoughtful, very deserving of everything that she has. And, it's really been, I think, just evidence of her faith in God and her values that have really made her the inspiration that she is. And I just think that everybody she meets and talks with, they feel blessed in her presence because she truly is an amazing young woman. I'm really in awe and really blessed for my daughter.
Well, we are really happy and very fortunate to meet you and have you come before the public in Lake County, because other families may be in this same predicament.
Yeah.
And what could have been done is cutting off of her life from accomplishing the thing that she's doing.
Amen.
She's an innocent person, a lovely person. I haven't met her, but the thing that she's doing, in spite of the rape.
Absolutely.
And no one should be involved with this type of thing. She's, I don't know. We could go on and on and on, but boy, I just salute you. You've done doing a great job and provided, and that's probably the reason why you have not married again.
I've never been married. No.
So you want to go through this again, a possibility of going through this again, right?
Going through the possibility of what again?
Of probably having another daughter or son to be involved with this type of thing.
Well, see, unfortunately, because I'm so well versed on everything,
Okay.
I mean, for me, nothing I do as far as public policy benefits me because I've already become an expert. It's really more to prevent those who are going in for the first time with the same ignorance that I had, protecting them from becoming further victimized. That's really what justice means to me.
Right. And just a statement here. I know that's all we have time for, the statement. We have another problem, the Equal Rights Amendment. Why is it so difficult? What does it need to get this Equal Rights Amendment passed? Women think that they have their rights, right? But they really don't. And why don't they have their rights? What about this law that needs to be passed?
Well, it kind of goes with people think that, like when you're a victim of crime, they think that the state's attorney or prosecutor represents them.
Okay.
So they don't really need legal representation, or why would they need legal representation? The same thing when it comes to the equal rights for women. In the U.S. Constitution, there's no amendment that actually secures our right to be protected against discrimination based on gender.
Okay.
So until we can have language, only at the state level do we have that language in our state constitution, as I mentioned. Mm-hmm. But on the federal level, if you don't have language guaranteeing that protection against the discrimination on gender, then it really puts you in a position where now you're going to have to face violations, victimizations. Then you're going to have to go through the courts, and the courts are going to have to straighten it out. Ultimately, where we all get our rights and laws is from the legislature. So we need Congress and we need our General Assembly in Springfield to make sure that the laws that they enact are truly in the interest of protecting the rights for all people. We have to make sure it's for all.
Now, how do we get this in the Constitution now? We have to understand we're pretty close to getting this.
Well, they are going to have to wait till the even year election until it can be put on the ballot during the general election like it was in 2014. So now we have to wait to 2016. And then if it gets on the ballot, then voters can vote for it. But, like we saw in 2014, the House did not get it out of the House, not pass it out.
Now, Illinois, one of the states are lagging behind. We need, how many states do we need? About 7 in the nation?
I think it was actually less than that. Wasn't it like 3 or 5?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's something around that number, not very many.
So the people can understand we need, give me the number, 3/5 of the states to get an amendment ratified?
Yeah, the actual particulars of that amendment, I am not well versed, so I don't want to throw anything out there. But I can go back and check on the actual. But that does sound about right, 3/5.
We do need Illinois to come aboard, though.
We do.
They're one of the few states that have not passed it.
That's correct.
Wow. And I like to emphasize, representatives here in Illinois, senators and representatives, we have women in our family. We have mothers, we got daughters, we got sisters, and so forth. So why is it taking so long? What is the problem in getting this bill passed in the state of Illinois?
Well, when the candidates are up for re-election, that's a good question to ask them for those who have been in office.
Thank you very much, Denise. We're right at the end of the time, but like I mentioned, we're going to need a part 2, and I'm sure we're going to have a part 2. Like we're going to have a part 2 on our radio program, our TV program also.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks, and thank you for all your outreach. Your work is tremendous in the community, and you're doing great advocacy for all people. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Community Focus. My name is Dr. Wandell Brooks Sr., your host.